Michael Jordan finds his childhood best friend struggling to survive. What he does next leaves everyone in awe. Michael Jordan had seen the world. From the basketball courts of Chicago to the luxury suites of his own business empire, his life had unfolded with a brilliance few could ever imagine. But today, as he found himself on a quiet afternoon walking through the old streets of Wilmington, North Carolina, the weight of his past felt heavier than it had in a long time. He had just finished a few back-to-back meetings, and something about the day made him long for a moment of simplicity, of connection to where it all began. His footsteps echoed as he strolled through the neighborhood he had once called home. The houses had changed, and some of the familiar storefronts had been replaced with newer, more modern ones, but the sense of familiarity remained. Michael had grown up here, playing basketball in the neighborhood, running through the streets with friends, and always feeling that sense of community that only childhood could offer. It wasn't just the trophies or accolades that defined him, but the people he'd grown up with. And among those people, one stood out more than the rest: Derek, his best friend. Derek had been there through it all. The two had been inseparable as kids, shooting hoops together on cracked courts, sharing dreams of what they might one day become. But Derek's path had been different from Michael's. While Michael soared to basketball stardom, Derek had remained in Wilmington, living a life that wasn't as glamorous, facing challenges that Michael could never fully comprehend. As Michael walked down the street, he found himself drawn to an old, familiar corner, a place he hadn't seen in years. There, at the end of the block, was a small convenience store that he and Derek used to visit after school. The memories came flooding back, the sounds of their laughter, the quiet camaraderie of two young boys trying to carve out a future. Michael hesitated for a moment, then walked toward the corner. As he passed the store, he caught a glimpse of an alleyway nearby that led to the rundown park where they used to play. And that was when he saw it, something that made his heart stop for a moment. Sitting on the steps of an old, dilapidated building was a man with a weathered face and tattered clothes. At first glance, Michael barely recognized him. The man was hunched over, looking down at the ground, his expression one of weariness. But then, as if sensing someone was watching, he looked up. The gaze was slow at first, but then recognition hit. "Mike?" the man asked, his voice raspy, almost unrecognizable. Michael's heart skipped a beat. "Derek," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. It was Derek. But he was different, so different. The vibrant, ambitious boy Michael had known all those years ago had been replaced by a man who looked worn out, as if life had taken its toll in ways Michael could never have imagined. Derek's clothes were ragged, and his face was thinner than it had been. His once bright eyes now seemed clouded, and there was a sadness about him that Michael had never seen before. Michael took a few steps forward, his mind racing. "What happened to you, man?" His voice was a mixture of shock, concern, and guilt. He had been so wrapped up in his own life, his own success, that he hadn't realized what had happened to the people who had once been so close to him. Derek didn't immediately answer. Instead, he wiped his brow with his sleeve, trying to collect himself before speaking. I didn't expect you to be here, man. It's been a long time." Michael kneeled down in front of him, trying to catch his eye. "I never thought I'd see you like this," Michael said softly. "I've been around the world, and I've done a lot of things, but you were always my best friend." "What happened, Derek?" Derek's face softened as he looked down, the weight of the question pressing on him. "Life, man," he said with a dry chuckle. "It's funny, you know? You get caught up, things don't go your way. I made some mistakes, fell into some bad habits, and the next thing you know, you're here. It's hard to explain." Michael felt his chest tighten as he listened. He knew Derek had struggled, but seeing his friend like this, sitting in the shadow of the man Michael had become, left him speechless. This wasn't the Derek he remembered. This wasn't the kid who had once shared his dreams. This was a man who had been broken, and Michael wasn't sure how to fix it. "Derek, I don't even know what to say," Michael admitted, the words escaping him like air from a balloon. "I've been so caught up in my own life. I didn't know things had gotten this bad for you." Derek gave a bitter smile, shaking his head. You don't have to apologize, Mike. You're doing great. Look at you, living the dream. You don't have to feel bad for me. I made my choices. But Michael couldn't shake the feeling of responsibility that washed over him. Derek was more than just a friend, he was family. They had shared so much together, and yet Michael had moved on to fame and fortune, while Derek had been left behind. I don't feel bad for you, Derek, Michael said with a quiet intensity. I feel like I should have done more. You were always there for me. I should have been there for you. You don't deserve this. Derek glanced up at Michael, his eyes a little misty, as if the reality of the situation was just beginning to hit him too. It's too late for me, Mike. I'm beyond help. I don't expect anyone to come back for me now. It's over. Michael's heart ached as he looked at the man who had once been his closest companion. Derek had given up on himself, and that was the hardest thing for Michael to accept. But Michael wasn't about to let his best friend walk away from this moment without doing something. Derek, Michael said firmly, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. It's not over. Not yet. Michael sat beside Derek on the cold, cracked steps of the building where Derek had been living for what seemed like years. The weight of the moment settled heavily on Michael's chest, and he fought to hold back the emotions that were threatening to surface. He had spent his entire career facing some of the toughest competitors in basketball, yet here he was, unable to help the man who had once been his closest friend. Derek's life had taken a sharp turn, one Michael couldn't have anticipated. The harsh reality of the situation was difficult for Michael to process. How had it come to this? How had the vibrant, determined young man he had known transformed into someone struggling just to survive? Derek wasn't just a friend, he was family. And seeing him like this was an emotional gut punch that Michael couldn't ignore. Derek, tell me what happened, Michael said, his voice soft but filled with concern. He wanted to know the full story, to understand how his best friend had ended up in such a dire situation. He wasn't going to make assumptions, not when Derek's struggles were so clearly the result of a combination of choices and circumstances. Derek leaned back against the building, his face lined with exhaustion and regret. He looked up at the sky for a moment, searching for words. You ever have that feeling, Mike? Like you're standing at the bottom of a hill, and you just can't seem to climb it no matter how hard you try? That's been my life, man. I made some bad choices when I was younger, got caught up in the wrong crowd, started drinking, smoking. You know how it is. I never thought it would get this bad. But one day, I woke up, and everything was gone. Lost jobs, lost friends, and after a while, it felt like it was just me against the world. Michael listened in silence, his heart sinking with each word Derek spoke. He had known about Derek's struggles with alcohol and bad decisions over the years, but hearing it from him now, seeing the man he had known as a kid, full of energy and dreams, brought a new layer of grief. It wasn't just about bad decisions. It was about years of living with the weight of those choices and not knowing how to escape. I don't blame anyone but myself, Derek continued, his voice thick with emotion. I had opportunities, man. Hell, you remember when we used to dream about making it big? I thought I'd be there with you, Mike, celebrating those wins. But here I am, stuck in this cycle. I just don't know how to break free anymore. Michael wanted to say something, to offer words of comfort, but the weight of what Derek was going through was suffocating. He knew that no amount of money, no grand gesture, could erase the scars Derek had accumulated over the years. But he wasn't going to let his friend slip through his fingers, not without trying. You don't have to do this alone, Derek, Michael said, his voice filled with a sense of determination. I'm here. I know you've been through hell, but you don't have to stay there. You've got a chance to change this. We can fix this. You're not too far gone. Derek gave a short, humorless laugh, his eyes brimming with disbelief. You don't get it, Mike. It's not that easy. I've tried before, you know? Rehab, therapy, nothing sticks. I go a few weeks clean, and then something triggers it, and I'm right back where I started. You're a billionaire now. I'm just a guy who can't even get a proper meal some days. There's no way I can catch up to where you're at. And I've lost faith in myself." The words hit Michael harder than he expected. He had been so focused on his own life, his own success, that he hadn't realized how deeply Derek had fallen. The distance between them had seemed so insurmountable in the beginning, but now, with every passing minute, Michael felt that gap growing smaller. Derek wasn't asking for a handout, he wasn't asking to live Michael's life. He just wanted to have the chance to start again. "You don't have to catch up to me, Derek," Michael replied quietly. "You never did. This isn't about comparing us or trying to match what I've done. This is about you finding your way back. We can take it one step at a time." Derek's eyes flickered, a mixture of skepticism and hope. "One step at a time? I don't know, man. I've tried everything I can think of, and still nothing changes." Michael looked at his friend, not as the basketball legend he was, but as the man who had spent countless hours on the court with Derek as a kid, talking about their dreams. "Derek, you don't have to do it all in one go. You've got a lifetime ahead of you. We can take it slow. We can start with the basics, getting you clean, finding you a place to stay. You don't have to live like this anymore. But the first thing you have to do is believe you deserve better. Believe that you can start over." There was a long silence. Derek's eyes softened, and for the first time, Michael saw a glimmer of hope in them. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "I don't know if I can do this, Mike," Derek said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to do it alone," Michael reassured him. "You've got me, and you've got the people who care about you. And I'm not going to give up on you." For a moment, they just sat there, the weight of everything they had said and shared between them. The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in that quiet space. As Michael looked at Derek, he realized that this wasn't just about helping his friend, it was about showing Derek that he was worthy of a second chance. Derek hadn't failed, life had simply knocked him down. But Michael wasn't going to let him stay down. Michael stood up and extended his hand to Derek, who hesitated for a moment before taking it. The gesture wasn't just a physical act, it was a symbol of the promise Michael had made to himself. He wasn't going to walk away from this. Not without helping Derek find his way back. "You ready to start, Derek?" Michael asked, his voice filled with warmth and certainty. Derek looked up at Michael, and for the first time in a long while, he nodded. "Yeah. I'm ready." The days that followed Michael's offer to help Derek were filled with a quiet but powerful sense of purpose. Michael made it clear from the start that he wouldn't let Derek go through this alone. They began by taking small steps, focused on getting Derek back on his feet. It wasn't about grand gestures, but about creating a stable foundation. Michael knew that true recovery would take time and patience, and he was prepared to walk that path with his friend, every step of the way. Michael didn't waste any time setting things into motion. The first step was finding Derek a safe place to live, something more stable than the streets, somewhere he could begin his journey of healing. He arranged for Derek to stay in a small, cozy apartment, just a few blocks away from his own home. The place was simple, but it was a fresh start, free from the chaos and temptation of the streets. They spent the first few days organizing the apartment, with Michael helping Derek pick out some basic furniture and household items. Michael didn't want to just throw money at the problem, he wanted to be a part of Derek's recovery, to be involved in every detail. It was about building trust, one small step at a time. And that meant not rushing. Derek needed to feel like he had control over his own life again. "I don't know if I've ever had my own place before," Derek said, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude as he looked around the modest apartment. "It's not much, but it's more than I've had in a long time." Michael smiled, watching Derek slowly begin to settle in. "It's a start. You've got a roof over your head, and that's the most important thing right now. The rest can come later." The next few days involved setting up appointments, first, for therapy and counseling. Michael had made arrangements for Derek to meet with a professional to help him address his addiction, something that had been a constant battle in his life. Michael also contacted a support group where Derek could connect with others who had been through similar struggles. These were steps Derek wasn't used to taking. He had always tried to do everything on his own, but now, with Michael's encouragement, he was beginning to see the power of accepting help. The process wasn't easy for Derek. There were days when he was angry, frustrated, and felt like giving up. The addiction didn't just go away, it was a daily battle. But Michael was there, reminding him that recovery wasn't a straight line. It was okay to have setbacks, as long as Derek kept moving forward. One evening, as Michael visited Derek at his apartment, he could see the exhaustion in his friend's eyes. Derek had just returned from his first counseling session, and it had been emotionally draining. He was sitting on the couch, staring at the floor, unsure of how to process everything that had been said. "I don't know, Mike," Derek admitted, his voice weary. "I thought I could just move on. But now that I'm actually facing everything, it feels like too much. It's hard to look at myself and not see all the mistakes I've made. I don't know how to fix it." Michael sat down beside him, his voice calm and reassuring. "Derek, it's going to take time. You can't expect to heal all at once. But you've already taken the first step. You're here, you're doing the work. That's what matters." Derek looked at Michael, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "What if I don't make it, Mike? What if I can't get through this? What if I'm just too far gone?" Michael took a deep breath and put a hand on Derek's shoulder. "You're not too far gone. I don't believe that for a second. You're still here. And that means there's a chance. You're fighting, and that's more than most people can say. But you've got to believe in yourself too." There was a long pause before Derek spoke again. "I don't know if I believe in myself right now. But maybe, with you here, I can start to." Michael smiled. "That's all I'm asking for, Derek. One step at a time. We don't have to have all the answers today. But if you keep showing up, I promise you that things will get better. You just have to trust the process." The next few weeks were a mixture of highs and lows. Derek had moments of clarity and strength, but there were also setbacks, times when he wanted to give up, when the weight of his past seemed too heavy to bear. But each time Derek faltered, Michael was there. He checked in daily, whether it was with a simple text, a phone call, or a visit to the apartment. Michael made sure Derek knew he wasn't alone, that they were in this together. One afternoon, as Michael was sitting with Derek in the small living room, they talked about the future. Derek was beginning to feel the effects of the therapy and support groups. He was starting to believe in the possibility of change, even if it was just a small glimmer of hope. "I don't know what's next, Mike," Derek said, his voice quieter than usual. "But for the first time in a long time, I'm starting to think maybe I can get there." Michael looked at his friend, his heart swelling with pride. "That's all I need to hear. As long as you keep fighting, I'll be here. We're going to do this, Derek. Together." For the first time in months, Derek smiled, a real smile, one that reached his eyes. It wasn't a smile of triumph, but of hope. He was starting to see that change was possible, that the life he had lost could be rebuilt. It had been a few weeks since Derek had moved into the small apartment with Michael's help. His days were now filled with therapy, counseling, support group meetings, and the slow, steady work of rebuilding his life. At first, Derek was optimistic, he had hope, he had motivation, but now, as he faced the brutal reality of his past and the long road ahead, his enthusiasm began to wane. Derek found himself slipping into old patterns, struggling to keep up with the new routine. Despite the support he had from Michael and the help he was receiving, the weight of the past continued to haunt him. There were days when Derek felt like giving up, days when he couldn't see the point of continuing. The addiction, the mistakes, and the failures were like an ever-present shadow, taunting him with reminders of how far he had fallen. Michael could see it in Derek's eyes. There were cracks in the resolve Derek had shown when he first moved in. He wasn't as eager as he had been before. He wasn't as sure of himself. The weight of change had begun to feel unbearable. One evening, as Michael was visiting Derek at his apartment, he noticed his friend sitting silently on the couch, staring out the window. The dim light of the evening cast a shadow over Derek's face, and Michael immediately sensed something was wrong. "Derek, what's going on?" Michael asked, his voice filled with concern as he sat down next to him. Derek didn't answer at first. He just stared out the window, his fingers nervously tapping on his knee. After a long silence, he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I can do this, Mike. I've tried. I really have. But it feels like I'm just pretending. Like I'm faking it. Nothing's changing. I'm still that same guy who messed up everything. I don't know how to make this stick." Michael's heart clenched as he heard the self-doubt in Derek's voice. He knew this part of the journey was going to be difficult, but seeing his friend so defeated hurt more than he could have anticipated. Derek had been through hell, and now he was facing the harshest part of recovery, the battle against his own demons, the part where he had to confront everything that had led him to this point. "You're not pretending, Derek," Michael said firmly, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. "You're doing the work. You're showing up, and that's what matters. It's not going to be easy. You're going to have days where it feels like it's all too much. But that doesn't mean you're not changing." Derek shook his head, the frustration building in his chest. "It's not enough, Mike. I don't know how to keep doing this. Every day feels like I'm fighting a battle I can't win. And I'm scared. Scared that I'll mess it up again, that I won't ever be good enough to get it right." Michael looked at his friend, seeing the pain in his eyes. Derek was tired, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. The weight of his past was suffocating him, and no amount of support seemed to be making it easier. But Michael knew that this was a pivotal moment. If Derek was going to succeed, if he was going to change, he had to push through the self-doubt, the fear of failure, and keep fighting. "Derek, listen to me," Michael said, his voice strong. "You've been through so much, but you're here. You're alive. And you're trying. That's more than most people can say. This isn't about being perfect. It's about taking one step forward, even on the days when you feel like you've failed. You've got to believe in yourself, man. You've got to trust that you're worth this fight. And I'm here with you. Every step of the way." Derek turned to Michael, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and skepticism. "I don't know, Mike. I want to believe that. But it's hard. It feels like there's no way out of this." Michael sighed deeply. He understood the struggle. He knew that when you've been down for so long, it's easy to feel like there's no way back. But he wasn't going to let Derek give up, not when he had come so far. "I know it's hard," Michael said quietly, his voice softer now. "But you've already made the hardest decision of all. You decided to change. And that's something worth fighting for. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep trying. You can't let the past define you, Derek. It's over. What matters now is who you choose to be moving forward." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Derek was still unsure, still weighed down by his own doubts. But there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a recognition of the truth in Michael's words. It wasn't going to be easy, but maybe, just maybe, he could find the strength to keep going. After a long silence, Derek finally spoke, his voice quieter, but with a trace of determination. I'll try, Mike. But it's not going to be easy." Michael smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "I know it won't be. But I believe in you, Derek. And you don't have to do it alone." The following weeks were a difficult but crucial time for Derek. He fought through the moments of doubt and the constant pull of his old habits, and with Michael's unwavering support, he slowly started to make progress. Every day wasn't a victory, but every small step forward was a step in the right direction. Derek continued with his therapy, went to support groups, and worked through his self-doubt. It was a long and tiring journey, But for the first time in a long time, he had hope. He had something to fight for, not just his future, but the belief that he was capable of change. Michael watched as Derek struggled and grew, and in those moments, he knew that the hardest part wasn't over, but they were moving in the right direction. One step at a time. The days that followed Derek's darkest moment marked a significant shift in his journey. As the weeks turned into months, Michael noticed the subtle changes in his friend, the small, everyday victories that weren't immediately visible but were powerful in their own right. Derek wasn't just going through the motions anymore, he was learning to trust himself, to believe in the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by his past mistakes. And with Michael's unwavering support, he began to rebuild his life, step by painful step. One morning, Michael arrived at Derek's apartment to find him sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, staring out the window. There was something different about the way Derek carried himself now. He seemed more grounded, more confident. It was a quiet transformation, but one that Michael could feel in the air. "Morning, man," Michael greeted as he stepped into the apartment, his voice light and filled with the usual warmth. "How are you feeling today?" Derek turned to him and smiled. It wasn't a huge grin, but it was real. "I'm good," he replied. "I'm actually feeling okay. I mean, it's been a tough road, but I'm starting to get the hang of it." Michael couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when Derek truly began to believe in his own ability to change. The transformation wasn't immediate, nor had it been without setbacks, but it was happening. Derek was finding his footing again. The next few weeks were filled with more small victories. Derek attended therapy regularly and continued going to support group meetings. But perhaps the most significant change was in his attitude. The self-doubt that had once defined him was slowly being replaced by a quiet confidence. He had stopped focusing on his past mistakes and started embracing the future, no matter how uncertain it seemed. One afternoon, as Michael visited Derek, he noticed something that spoke volumes about his friend's growth. Derek was back at a community event, volunteering at a local food bank. It was something he had once been passionate about, but in the past, he had let his struggles prevent him from giving back. Today, however, he was there, helping those in need with the same kindness and compassion he had shown as a young man. "Hey, Mike," Derek greeted with a smile as he saw Michael approach. "It's good to see you." Michael returned the smile, feeling a sense of pride. "Look at you, man. Helping out the community again. That's huge." Derek shrugged, though his smile never wavered. "It feels right, you know? I used to love doing this, and now I'm finally in a place where I can do it again. I may not have a lot, but I've got more than I had before. And I think it's time I give something back." Michael nodded, his heart swelling with pride. That's what it's all about. Giving back, doing the right thing, even when it's tough. "I'm proud of you, Derek." Derek's eyes softened as he looked at Michael. "I never could have done this without you, Mike. You've been there for me through everything, even when I didn't deserve it. I don't know how to thank you." Michael placed a hand on Derek's shoulder. "You don't have to thank me, Derek. You've done all the hard work. You've made the decision to change, and that's the hardest part. I'm just glad to see you getting back to who you really are." A few months later, Derek stood before a small group of friends and family at a community event, his head held high. He had been sober for over a year now, and while the road hadn't been easy, he had come further than he ever thought possible. The transformation wasn't just physical or emotional, it was spiritual. Derek had found peace within himself, and it radiated outward, touching the lives of those around him. As he stood there, speaking to the small crowd about his journey, Derek's voice was steady, filled with a quiet strength. "It hasn't been easy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "There were times when I wanted to give up. But I had to learn that it's never too late to start over. No matter how far you've fallen, you can always pick yourself up and try again. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm a hell of a lot closer than I was." The crowd erupted into applause, and Michael, who was standing in the back, felt his chest swell with pride. He watched as Derek stood tall, no longer the man burdened by shame and regret, but someone who had found redemption through hard work, self-belief, and the love of those who cared about him. Derek's transformation had been nothing short of extraordinary, and it was a testament to his resilience. As the applause died down, Derek looked toward Michael, who stood with a proud smile on his face. The two shared a moment of silent understanding. Michael had been there every step of the way, and now Derek was standing on his own 2 feet, ready to take on whatever came next. "Thanks, Mike," Derek said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You saved my life." Michael shook his head, his smile unwavering. "No, Derek. You saved your own life. I just helped you find your way." The story of Derek's transformation had become a beacon of hope for those around him. His journey wasn't just about recovery, it was about learning to believe in oneself again, to trust that no matter how dark the past, the future could be brighter. With Michael's support, Derek had found the strength to rewrite his story, one day at a time. For Michael, watching his childhood best friend rebuild his life was the most rewarding part of his own journey. It wasn't about the accolades or the fame, it was about helping Derek reclaim his future, about giving him a chance to live the life he deserved. Their bond, once forged on basketball courts and childhood dreams, had grown into something much deeper, a bond of love, support, and redemption. As Michael and Derek stood together that day, looking out at the community they had both grown up in, Michael realized that the real victory wasn't in the championship rings or business achievements. The real victory was in seeing Derek not only survive but thrive. The road wasn't over for either of them. Life would continue to throw challenges their way. But for the first time in years, Derek was walking with his head high, confident in who he was and who he could become. And Michael knew that whatever came next, they would face it together.